But Africa's got its own challenges, so it's going to be very interesting to hear what the panel has to say in terms of bringing in the data analytics, bringing in the end user experience in making that a valuable and growth area for digital access. So I'd like to introduce the moderator, Lionel Reina. He's the CEO of the APO Group, the largest Pan-African corporate communications company. He gave me a couple of stats earlier on, which are quite interesting. That 25% of his clients are African. Out of his entire client base, 50% are US headquartered, 30% are European, and 25% are Middle East. That means there are a huge number of companies that are investing in Africa from these developed markets. So we take that as a really, really encouraging sign as to the future. And let's see how you guys can turn that investment into an awesome user experience. Lionel, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I didn't hear anything. I know this is the third day, but bear with us. I think you're going to have an exciting panel and discussion. It's a little bit of a homecoming for me today because after 20 plus years working in IT, technology, telecom, I moved to media, another exciting field. But I'm very glad to be here today, moderating this panel. And as Diane was saying, we hear a lot during this conference about technology, obviously, but today it's all about customers. It's all about the customer experience. It's all about the customer journey. And it's all about how technology can help developing, enhancing this customer journey. A lot of companies, and I was part of them in the past, are more and more talking about customer experience, customer journey. But what does it really mean? And how does technology can help really to enhance the experience? Is it just a must, a nice to have, or is this a new reality of the world? So without to wait longer, I would like to introduce my panel, and I would start with Unathi Mtya. I hope I pronounce the name well. She has had 20 years of experience covering portfolio across a wide spectrum of ICT technical disciplines. She has held senior management roles in the public and private sector and is currently the Chief Technology Officer at Grindrod Bank in Johannesburg, South Africa. Please. I would like also to... Please. I would like also to introduce Bertrand Fallon-Kund. Bertrand has 13 years of experience in technology intelligence companies, 5 years of those based in Africa. He's an expert in telecommunication, media and technology, called TMT. He has experience in customer strategy and marketing and private equity practices, very impressive. Belgium national, Bertrand is currently a partner in Bain and Company based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And he's an avid football player. Please welcome Bertrand on stage. I also meant to mention for Unathi that she's a fervent runner. I think you run marathon. And I need to quote that because I think it's quite impressive. She has completed New York 2 times, Paris 2 times, London, Prague, Barcelona, China, Athens, and Berlin. I wish I could say the same. And finally, on my stage, I would like to welcome Francis Mumbi, 13 years in financial services and technology, covering financial and management accounting, investment banking, and venture capital, credit risk management, data analytics, product and design. Francis is a lead innovation at the moment at Stanbic Bank in Lusaka, Zambia, and he's passionate about Africa and farming. So please welcome Francis on stage. Thank you all for joining this discussion. And perhaps, when preparing this panel, one of the questions the first question that came to my mind is probably defining what customer experience is. because depending on which world you're living in, what business you're in, what technology you're using, or what type of company you are, the definition could be very different. So I would like to ask you all the first question. What does really customer experience mean to me? And perhaps I start with you, ladies first.
Ladies first. I wish I can hear that more. Ladies first. Thanks, Lionel. I think in simple terms for me, so customer experience is a relationship a business has with a customer. But for me, it's someone knowing my name. It's someone delivering a service in the way that I want. It's someone understanding who I am and what's going to make a difference for me to be satisfied with that service. So in simple terms, that's what it is for me. It's someone knowing my name and me having comfort that I'm not just a number and I'm a valuable customer in a business, regardless of its size.
So the personalization, the personal view of being special as a customer, right?
Yeah.
What about you, Bertrand?
I like to think about it as a consultant, but it's also true in the B2B and in the B2C sphere. Ultimately, great customer experience comes on the back of delivering outstanding work, right? And if you deliver outstanding work, hopefully your clients, your customers become heavily promoters. So what they will do, they'll stay much longer with you. There is a lot of evidence of that typically they'll stay 3 times longer than dissatisfied customers. They will buy more. You can sell them more products, more projects. Again, true in B2C and B2B. And ultimately, and probably even the most important, they'll talk very positively about your business or your product, your solutions to their friends, to their colleagues, versus bad-mouthing and creating negative referral. So that's, for me, the ultimate outcome of a positive customer experience.
So this is delivering the service and delivering the commitment toward the customer.
Exactly right.
This is the way you would define it.
Yes, and ultimately this happens when delivering a product and solution, when being on the ground. I mean, events like those are fantastic to get initial contacts, but ultimately, and I'm sure I talk for a lot of people in the room, the ultimate business comes through by doing the work and creating those promoters and this positive flywheel.
Francis, you're working in a bank, and I think you're a quite generalist bank, so you offer diverse type of services. In your eyes, and perhaps also in the eyes of your bank, what does it mean, customer experience?
I think, thanks, Lionel. In my experience and in financial services generally, I think customer experience looks at how do you identify the customer needs, and then strive to consistently meet and exceed your customers' needs. So for me, I think the working model that I have is rather formulaic. So you have your value proposition. So if you're going to write it down in a formula, you've got your value proposition in terms of what is your promise to your customers as a numerator, the number on top, and that is consistently weighed against your customers' expectations of you. So if customers are placing a demand on you to say they want speedy service at a reasonable price, how are you meeting and exceeding that need? If you're in telco, for instance, they're expecting you to be available 99.99 times of the time. How are you meeting and exceeding that need? So it's around intimately understanding your customers' pain points and aspirations, and striving to meet those.
So intimate understanding means also perhaps predictability, means perhaps, could you, Francis, give a couple of examples in your bank? And what I would also like to understand is, perhaps before we go to the concrete example, is you all mention a different definition, you all have a different view of customer experience. But what I would like to understand is, did this customer evolved? Because as we know, the world is changing dramatically. The way we communicate, the way we approach customers is changing dramatically. So what is your experience, perhaps, over the last 5 years? It is evolved. Do you see that in your own life? Do you see that in your own business? Perhaps, Bertrand, you could...
I think, for me, 2 data points. The first one, it's obviously quite trivial and unsurprising, but there are a lot of numbers being cited, but I think the overall estimate that 50 to 70% of transactions customer transactions have moved to digital over the past 5 years. So that's a massive, massive shift towards a digital customer experience. I think that's data point number one. I think second one, there is a lot of evidence. We surveyed execs all over Africa. 67% of those execs mentioned that in their perceptions, customers are less loyal than they were before.
Is that so?
So it might be perception, might be reality, but I think for me this is the shift we've experienced in the past 5 years.
Perhaps from your side?
Definitely, it has evolved. I think mostly it's dictated by the customer. So it's definitely evolved. And the interesting thing about customer experiences, because you know what they say, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, value is in the eye of the beholder. I like that stats you're bringing, like in telcos, 99% of availability. It doesn't mean your customer is actually going to say they're happy with you because you are the service is available 99.99% of the time. So the intimate understanding of that customer, and this speaks to data analytics and many other things that are going to make you understand how your customer wants things. Because value is in the eye of the beholder. Someone else actually can deliver a slightly less satisfying service, but a customer may feel, I'm very happy with them. In fact, I'm going to go back to them because value is in the eye of the beholder.
Because what if the 0.001% of downtime is during the rugby final, right? Then
and it might not be the most important thing for them, but that's the service you deliver. But in understanding what that is, then they're able to claim, okay, we're satisfied with that value.
Yes.
And I really like to come back to this definition because for me this is the core of everything. Perhaps from your experience, how has your experience in the bank evolved over the last 5 years? Do you treat customers the way you did? And perhaps also the follow-up question is, do you offer the same services?
I think there's some underlying societal and business trends around the shift to digital platforms and expectation of a digital experience from our customers on us as banks, but certain things still remain standard within the financial services industry. But what we're seeing is that customers are transferring experiences from other industries. They're transferring their Uber experience to banking. They're expecting us banks to be as fast and as effective as these other digital platforms. And what that means is that as an industry and as players, we have to up our game in terms of how do we anticipate our customers' needs, how do we accurately meet those customers' needs, and how to execute consistently against those customers' needs. That's one angle. The other angle is that customers want to feel and see a personalized service. They want us to be able to demonstrate that we truly understand where they are now and where they see themselves in 2, 3, or 5 years. So it may mean that having a customized loan offering for a particular customer, which may be suitable for Unathi, but slightly different for Bertrand. It may be offering stable, seamless payments, which extend beyond our normal traditional form factors. So it could be maybe building a partnership with a telco who can deliver last mile services. So these expectations continue to increase as customers transfer experiences from other industries which are executing with excellence.
So personalized experience are trying to have a single interface to the customer and understand the customer more and deeper. Preparing this panel, you mentioned also what you're doing in your bank with insurance companies, cross products, cross services proposition to the customer. Is it a reality in the banking world? In other words, will the banks or generalist bank sell moving forward other services? Will they sell cars? Will they sell insurance services? Will they sell food? Where do you see it going?
I think where I see it going, I think it's true for banking. It's also true for any other service industry. As a service provider, we are what we can term as a derived industry. people come to banking not because they want to do banking per se, but there's an inherent need that they want to fulfill. So, for instance, if you've got a need to, for instance, say mobility, you want to be able to move efficiently and effectively, you may come to us for a vehicle and asset finance solutions. For instance, that's an example. If you've got a need, all of us have probably traveled from different countries, from different locations. You've got a need to pay. They'll come to us and be able to access our payment rails in terms of cards and online payment channels. If you want to sort of plan for your children's education, you come to us for savings products. So there's an inherent need which is driving the demand for our services. So by us using analytics, we are able now to infer what would be the next logical step for a customer and begin to engage them and anticipate those needs and create those wow experience for them. We did an experiment within our local markets where we used some advanced analytics to anticipate what our customers' needs would be. Our models were able to suggest different products from digital channels through to insurance products. For insurance products, we discovered that some of our customers who are showing a pattern where they are transacting outside the country do have an affinity for travel insurance as an example. Some of our customers who are showing a certain spending pattern did have an affinity for savings and investments. So this sort of approach does help us remain relevant and help our customers achieve more.
And I think it is very interesting because you see that there is a shift of activity. Even while core banking will remain your main activity, activities around will really change, and the customer is becoming at the core of what you do. So before going into technology, perhaps I would like to have your view also about what this customer journey, where is it going, and how technology can help, in your opinion?
I think customers will continue changing businesses.
Okay.
When we were preparing yesterday, I was saying to you guys, it's funny how I behave like a millennial because I'm not a millennial, just in case you thought. That, if a bank tells me now, this process is going to take 2-3 days, I flip as if I've never heard of that before. Because I've become meaning I've changed.
Yeah.
I've changed over time. And I'm a different customer than I was 10 years ago. So I think customers will continue to change businesses because also they walk, and they don't indicate that we're going to leave. They leave and they go to another. So businesses are forced to keep up with the customer, are forced to understand customers more. I think that's possibly going to be the biggest driver. Of course, technology helps because the more data you have about that customer, and if you apply data analytics, then you're able to predict a little bit more. You're able to make decisions. And so I think the customer themselves are going to change businesses going forward. They're continuing to do that.
So you mentioned quite interesting concept here. Number one, speed.
Yeah.
Customers are not patient anymore. They want instant answer. Mm-hmm. Number two, predictability. So you want to know more and more what is happening in the head or in the life of your customers. And you mentioned something very interesting also, is that it's not only about technology. Technology will follow what the customer behavior does. Is that always the case, Bertrand?
Yeah, I fully agree here. I think the what remains the same, and it goes back to satisfied customers buy more, stay longer, refer more. But the how and how it's delivered, that's completely changing. So it is exactly the elements you mentioned, instant gratification, speed, and so on. And I think there are two drivers. One, there is a drive, as you mentioned, from the customer towards that. But there is also a huge push where, let's say, more traditional incumbent banks, telcos, industrial players are being completely disrupted by the digital natives who ultimately educate the customer to expect what you mentioned.
So I think the three of you are telling me now, and we all know that the world is changing at the light speed. The customer behavior is changing. Customer used to be patient, but is not anymore. So you need to have instant response. and you need to predict the behavior of the customer. Now, how technology can help that? I mean, are we ready to give instant response? Does analytics and advanced analytics, is it a response to get all the information that we need to support the customer behavior and to perhaps proposing the right product and service? What is your view on that?
Yeah, I was reading a report just this morning to say that 85% of customers who are engaging in this regard, financial services, would prefer to engage a financial service provider through chat interfaces rather than through a call center. 82% of those customers, again, demand an instant response. So yes, definitely, technology can enable you to sort of create those enhanced customer experiences and be able to meet their demands consistently and also efficiently.
Okay, but that's fine.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yes.
You have restriction, technology. If you want to have instant responses, you need to have bandwidth. You need to have the right softwares. You need to write the right server. Is infrastructure not a break of development, or to have perhaps Bertrand, do you have a view on infrastructure?
I think Lionel, it's spot on, and it's also our view. It's great that the banks, the telcos, they have this fantastic view. We're going to digitalize all customer journeys and customer episodes. But ultimately, if you think this continent, and let me cite 2025 projections, you'll have 1.3 billion here. The estimates are you'll have 600 million people with a mobile connection, not even a smartphone connection. That's just a 50% penetration, right? So you still have 50%. Of course, or you can go up to 90%. So at least 40% of the people which you don't reach, who are still not connected, either through phone or through basic data. And then again, in the ones connected, again, numbers vary a bit, but half of them only have smartphones. So it's great to mention all that, but if you're only talking about half the population, I think you miss a big part out. And then the second aspect is on where you have this connectivity. Of course, you mentioned the 99.9%, but you need to double click on that. What is the customer perception itself? And the customer will tell you something totally different in terms of network coverage and quality, which is ultimately the number one premise to be able to deliver on all that. So I think there is still a big way for the operators and ultimately the smartphone devices to put them in the hand of
perhaps,
everybody on this
Unathi,
continent.
are we far away to have advanced analytics, to have AI perhaps ticking in? Are we far away, or is it already a reality? I mean, how far are we from this instant information that we can propose to our customers?
Yeah, Lionel, in fact, I have a keynote straight after this on 4IR. I think we come from 4 different countries, right? Depending on where you come from in the world. Mm-hmm. Some countries are much closer than others. If you live in Denmark, every single person in Copenhagen has got internet access. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Every single human being, no matter what age, no matter what color, they've got access to the internet. So if they're trying to access government, they can do that from their homes.
Yes.
We can't say the same in this country. So I think it depends on what part of the world you come from. And so I think in general terms, we are close yet far. In other words, there are people who have this right at their fingertips. There could be organizations that are far ahead as well. But I do think it's easier said than done. I think for talking about customer experience now for organizations, financial services companies, banks, and so forth, as much as, we were talking about this yesterday, banks have had our data for decades. It's not like they're going to start having the data now. The question is, what's been stopping them to use it in a way that's going to help their revenues, or in a way that they're going to decide better. So, because I do live in South Africa, I'm going to say we far. We definitely far than we need to. These revolutions, and now the one we're at of the 4th Industrial Revolution, We're not even sure if we've gotten enough benefits from the previous ones. But like I say, depending on where you are.
So you would agree that infrastructure is one of the key of making it happen?
Infrastructure is, and remember, when organizations have invested in tons amounts of infrastructure, it's also not easy to just scrape that and put something new. So there's a lot of legacy that comes with that, and so it's huge investment decisions that companies are faced with.
And perhaps, so we understand that it will take time to have infrastructure. The data are here. Perhaps, Francis, from your side, I mean, you had the data for a long time. How advanced are you in your own experience with predictability and
Yeah, I think for us, it's not an event. It's more of a journey where we're learning and trying to better understand our customers and where we're going. I would also like to just maybe take a much more optimistic view in terms of some of the structural challenges that we face. I do agree that we've got an infrastructure challenge. I also do agree that I also do think that the future is here. All these technologies are available, but it's not evenly distributed. And for us, I think the innovation challenge is how do you actually design for the customer? So instead of us imagining a customer who is using a smartphone, who's got an internet connection, how do we design for a customer who's on a feature phone, has got no internet connection, but still be able to allow that customer to enjoy the benefits of artificial intelligence, enjoy the benefits of their service provider anticipating their next move, so that they can live a much more richer life. The other point is that we're also not trying to change the world all at once. We know that we probably won't address 90% of Africa's population in 2020, but for the customers who've chosen to interact with us, we want to make that experience rich as possible, so that they can refer, they can stay with us, and they can also educate us on what we should be doing better. So coming back to the question of how we're applying that, so we're making lots of investments in terms of our capabilities, in terms of our people. People who can correctly manipulate and interpret the data for us to be able to serve our customers better. We're also making investments in platforms, in technologies. If you look back 5 years ago and where we are today, certain technologies have matured, and the cost of compute is consistently coming down. Cloud technologies now can allow you to sort of start small and consistently scale up as you validate your business model. So that's a plus for us. And in terms of distribution, there are different form factors that we're employing. One of the case studies that we did, one experiment that we did was in our segment. So we enabled our relationship managers with insights on what the customer can demand from us. That allowed our relationship managers to build deeper relationships with our customers. It allowed our relationship managers to be able to sell more and then sell products which the customers actually needed. Instead of it being a product push, it became a demand from a customer. And the customers were actually excited for us. One of our customers says, why didn't you do this 3 months ago? I actually needed a solution like this, and it actually needed an insurance product. And this has come at the right time because I'm actually planning a trip into Europe. So these are the kind of experiences that we're trying to orchestrate. So the customer doesn't need to know that you're using artificial intelligence, you have got a cloud server. Or they want to understand that you know me as Francis, you know me as Bertrand or Unathi, and we're able to engage at the same level. The technology, the complexity, we keep behind. It's improving, it's helping us, but the customer ultimately has to know that you're working with them on their journey.
Let me, one point which Francis mentioned resonates a lot. we cannot solve everything at once. And at the risk of shooting myself in the foot, there is a lot of consulting and expert slideware and framework all around on artificial intelligence and a lot of stuff around. But ultimately, it's about very, very concrete use cases. Yeah. And I think Francis mentioned a nice use case. Let me give one example as well. You just want to solve a very specific problem and not talk about machine learning and how it helps. Yeah, fine, but what does it mean? So, for example, you can use, we did that, you can use for, let's say, a big brewer, a Heineken or a SAB, you can use telco data on an aggregated level, so they won't know where Francis goes drinking, but they will know where everybody goes drinking. And then you can identify, for example, which are the spots in Cape Town, in any African cities, which are highly popular, and you can really factualize that based on big data or advanced analytics. And like this, there are multiple use cases, but that's really solving a very specific business problem, which will result in better business outcomes.
Of course, they can say this, depending on who's sitting on the other side, who you're asking. So if a president of some country was sitting here, he can't say, I'm looking at a very specific problem, because he's got the whole country to serve.
That's true.
So I think that's fantastic because, organizations are doing what they can where they are. But your question, if it's in general terms, customers is all of us sitting here and the people who can't attend conferences like this, and so.
So I guess we've learned that the world is changing, customer behavior is changing, customer expectation is changing, that there are technology barriers depending on where we are in the world. It's more advanced or less advanced, so there is no one answer fits all. Yeah. But I think we can all agree on this panel that this is more and more about unicity. It's more and more about understanding the customers and predicting this behavior. Perhaps one question before we do the closing remarks is we spoke a lot about B2C here, individuals, private customer. Is that the same for companies? Company using the same technology analytics to serve their B2B customers? Yeah. Who has an opinion on that? Who wants to start? Bertrand?
Yeah, I think in B2B sales, it's probably, I'm sure a lot of you saw Rob Schutter here 2 days ago. I think a lot of his colleagues mentioned the same. It's ultimately you switch from this typical supplier customer to a proper partner relationship with your technology partners, with your consulting partners, marketing, PR, everything. So that's really the change. However, and it might be contradiction, you have this reduction in loyalty, which I'm sure we all experience. And then there, the digital, again, you need to de-average. It's very different industry by industry. I think on the one hand, the highly personalized partner approach remains critical if you take B2B in a bank, but then all the more, let's say, volume transactions should be fully automated and can be much more, which will, by the way, be much more user-friendly as well. So if you take, for example, let's take a very specific example. You take a telco B2B. So I sell 10,000 mobile SIM cards to a big mine. Well, in the beginning, I want to really be the spokesperson to the CIO, to the CTO, the trusted advisor, how he can optimize. You'll put femtocells in the mines and I don't know what. But then once it's there, well, he wants to have a super simple online portal where you have a new employee, click and go, and not go through 25 calls and call centers, which are different across 4 countries and so on. Yeah. So, yeah, it's that two-prune approach between trusted advisor, yet automating the more high-volume transactions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the principles do apply across B2B and B2C. For instance, we in the banking sector do work very closely with partners in telco, and there's around how do you agree in terms of the ultimate end goal. So if you look at banking, both the telco and us as a financial services provider are working in the interest of both our retail and business customers. So it does make sense that we can probably share our analytics in terms of peak demand For instance, if you know at a month end, you're expecting a spike in terms of, say, ATM and branch activity of 50%. Can our telco partners work with us and be able to predict and provision additional bandwidth in those times? We're both satisfying the customer who's paying the whole value chain, and we're also enhancing our own business prospects. So I think it's in a B2B context. My opinion is that yes, you should intimately understand your B2B partners, but also you should keep an eye on the end customer those B2B partners are actually serving, because they're the ones who are paying the whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
Unathi, your view of the B2B?
No, I agree. And what I'll add to what they're saying is, remember, whether it's B2B or B2C, you're still dealing with a human being. You're still dealing with a stakeholder, and for that, because of that, that same principle applies.
And I think that's a very good angle, perhaps, to conclude with closing remarks. I think it's all about people. It's all about the behavior is changing, the world is changing. So perhaps as a closing remark before we open to Q&A, I'd like to have your view about, where do you see, the customer experience, customer journey, because a lot of people talking about the customer. Is it all about the customer journey now? Is it all about the customer journey in the future? Are we stopping pushing product? Are we listening to customer first? And if it is so, how technology can help in the future? Perhaps starting with you, Francis?
What I see happening is that, of course, the customers will have a much more stronger voice in terms of how we design both our products and how.
Why? Why does it have a stronger voice than before?
Why do we have a stronger voice is that because with improvements in technologies across all industries, customers are now got a wider choice in terms of platforms which they can use to fulfill different needs. Barriers to entry are significantly reduced. We've got big platform players who are cutting across multiple players. So if you look at the telco industry, for instance, we've got big platform players like Facebook who are disrupting the voice business through WhatsApp calls. Microsoft has also done the same, although it's more on the enterprise side through platforms like Skype. Just this week, Facebook launched Facebook Pay on their messenger interface. So customers have got more choice now, and that increases their power. And as a business, you have to understand and take a step back and really project yourself in the customer's shoes and see, if I'm a customer sitting in sub-Saharan Africa with all the infrastructure challenges, and I've got a certain vision of where I want to be as an African, as an individual, what kind of bank will I want? What kind of telco will I want?
But if we don't, what if we don't, Bertrand? What if we don't predict for customer? What if we don't listen to the voice of customer? What's happening then?
But you're going to die. It's pretty simple.
Is it a must? I mean, can we avoid, and I say I'm a company, I don't want to listen to my customer. I don't want to give instant analytics. What if we don't?
It's not an or question. It's either or you listen to the customer or you avoid a product push. It's not one or the other. I think that's the wrong approach. For sure, you have listening to the customers, test and learn. We explained yesterday the whole agile methodology. You don't
develop.
Could you
perhaps 1 minute on?
Yeah, sure. So I think on that today you launch a new product, you don't develop a 2-year roadmap where you have different design and delivery milestones. That's completely obsolete, because once your product will go to market, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this audience knows, it's completely obsolete, it's dead. What you do is you work with a backlog of activities, and on a weekly basis, you have your sprints, and you test and learn as you go, you adjust based on customer reactions. So that's really the test and learn. However, I do think there is still room for brilliant minds to come up with very disruptive ideas. I mean, you have this famous saying by Henry Ford more than 100 years ago, where saying, if I had asked my customer what do they want will want a faster horse, right? So you need to have still be disruptive to open up for innovations, but it's not or. I think it's both of them go hand in hand.
That's true, certainly. Remember, one of the things that have made the customer more agile in their own behavior is technology, is the disruption in itself, wherein they were quite happy with the past behavior, but because of technology, exactly that. We're talking about design thinking, talking about people who sit and think, businesses disrupting others. I think that in itself has put the customer in a very fortunate position that they were previously maybe not in.
So, I mean, you've listened to my panelists here, and it's becoming more and more customer-centric. It's probably fair to say that a lot of companies are changing their business model from product-centric to customer-centric. Perhaps the closing question before I open for Q&A is, are all the companies doing it today? Is it really a must? And I'm coming back to this question. Customer-centric approach is the future, and digitalization with help. Perhaps a closing remark from you, Bertrand?
Sure. Are all customers doing it today? No. I mean, we all experience it when you order a train ticket here. Well, why do I need to put in my address 3 times? If I put it in once, it's probably sufficient. So everybody, I'm sure, has tons of examples of a very poor customer experience. So no, not all companies are doing it. And I think, to Unathi's point, the ones who are not doing it will be struggling. You see clearly that a poor customer experience is a leading indicator of future market share. So if you continue like this, well, you're going to disappear. I think a bit unrelated, but one closing point I want to re-emphasize. It's very good to talk about advanced analytics, digital, and so on and so forth. If the basic infrastructure play is not in place, then again, it remains highly theoretical, especially in this continent. So it's the basic connectivity, also the device play remains for me the key enabler.
Thank you, Bertrand. Perhaps, Francis, your closing remark. Are you going to become a universal bank, the everyday bank?
I think becoming an everyday bank is an aspiration that we're striving towards, where we're so in tune with our customers' demands such that they don't have to call a call center to resolve an issue, but we are anticipating and meeting their demands consistently. I think this trend is definitely set to grow and continue to grow. But in my personal view is that the current thinking and literature around user experience design and design thinking has got a more Eurocentric and American flavor. For me, the next wave is how do you use these toolkits and wisdom to apply to them for a customer in Lufwanyama in Zambia. So Lufwanyama is a rural district in Zambia where my dad retired to, and that's why he does his farming. How do I use design thinking for financial services to be able to serve his needs as he plans his cropping season? So that's the paradigm that I hope to see all of us leaders in this room begin to reflect on and begin to apply. How do you actually solve problems for the African?
Excellent. Unathi,
his passion is Africa.
His passion is Africa.
I tried to argue that yesterday. To answer your question, Lionel, so you're asking are all our organizations, all companies doing it? He's right, not. And I think it's fair to say, organizations are at a different part of their journey.
Yeah.
So they're in a different part of the S-curve. Some are on the tipping point, some are just starting, some have fallen and they're picking up again. So I think every journey is different and it's unique to an organization. So I think you'd find that they're different parts.
So on this note, I would now open the audience for questions, if there is any.
There's a hand there.
There's one over there. Yeah.
Hello. First of all, thank you, panel, for giving the very good information. My question is related to if we are a company and we are giving a feature to the end user and end customer that involve cost, and we have to make the benefit also from it. How we can balance it? Because if you will say in aviation industry as well as the telecom industry, most of the industry is shutting down because they are not able to provide the feature. They are reducing the cost, but it is not giving them the benefits.
I'm not sure I heard I'm not sure I heard it.
Francis, did you understand the question?
Yeah, maybe if, just for clarity, if I can rehash the comment to say that if you want to sort of employ all these new thinking and new approaches to business, but you are facing a resource constraint in terms of...
No, not the resource.
The cost.
If for a bank, they want to introduce new features,
Yeah.
the cost is involved.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The cost is involved.
Yes.
But we are not going to, customer will be happy because it is getting new features.
Mm.
But cost is not as, and we are not going to get benefited from there. So we are obviously giving add-on features to the customer, but we are not getting benefited.
Mm.
Like, I want to explain more. In the telecom company, if we will reduce the cost per GB to 5 Rand, obviously every will be attracted, but we can't sustain in the market.
Mm.
So how to balance it?
Yeah. I'm thinking right now, so you're talking about introducing features that will benefit the customers, but you're not getting the value out of it in financial terms. I think when that happens, you got to question yourself, because remember that business case is you are creating these features for a specific business problem, for a specific need. And first of all, I would argue you probably are not going to develop them if you don't see a value up front, if you don't see if you don't see a value in that business case. And because it should translate to either you keeping your customers or getting more customers at least. And if it's not translating to it, I think you must then question that value and question if indeed it's what your customers need. Is it what's making them stay?
Yeah, maybe to add, it's typically, if it can be a cost element, right? You see the marginal cost of a digital transaction is basically zero. So if this is a transaction which was previously in a call center or in a branch, it should translate in very substantial cost savings. Or it's indeed a feature which all your competitors are adding, you're not adding it, so you have a big risk of losing your customer base. Well, it's a must-do. Or it's an additional feature which your marketing team believes will increase royalty, will increase share of wallet. Yeah, maybe you should do it. Honestly, if it's a feature which doesn't meet any of the tick marks above, then I have no clue why you would do it.
To be honest as well, remember if 5 years ago it took, for a lack of a better example, it took 5 features to keep 20 customers, okay? It might take a little bit more now to keep the very same number of customers. And I think it's something this business must get accustomed to, that you need to do something better to keep the very customer base that you have.
Yeah, and I think, maybe just to build on that, I think it's a big challenge for particularly industries like telcos where the product is commoditized, and there's lots of industry competition. The same is also true for financial services. If you open a current account, is similar from bank A, B, and C, and the temptation is to throw features at the customers in the hope that they will stay. I know it's not an easy ask, but I'll circle back to our initial discussion point to say, how well do you understand your customers? That's one. And two, how well do you understand their pain points? That's number two. Number three, in terms of how well do you understand where the customers are going? If you're able to answer these customers, you can answer them by using your data analytics. What we normally do is that we run our analytics, but we also actually sit down with the customers and talk to them. Any feature that you release, you're highly likely to find the customers willing to exchange value for that feature in terms of money and be able to pay for it. And my hope is that your marginal cost of introducing that feature is way lower than the value that the customer is willing to give you. I can close maybe that question with an example. Yesterday, I held an Uber taxi. So I struck up a conversation with the driver, and it was a great guy. He's been to Zambia, he's been to Zimbabwe, he's now in South Africa. At the end of the ride, I was able to tip him with an additional tip, something I've never done with any Uber driver, because of the experience I had during that ride. So it all comes back to understanding your customer needs, understanding their pain points, and understanding where they're going so you can anticipate potential barriers. It's not easy, but it's something that has to be done.
And on this note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close the session and thank Francis, Bertrand, and Unathi to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lionel.
Thanks, Lionel.
Right. So thank you, Lionel. We're going to move quickly onto our next panel, where we're talking about skills development.